The classroom was silent, save for the sharp, cutting voice of Professor Harold Grayson. His words sliced through the air like a blade, each syllable dripping with disdain. "Mr. Thompson," he sneered, his lips curling into a cruel smirk, "do you even understand the basic principles of calculus, or are you just here to waste my time?" The room tensed. All eyes turned to the young man at the back of the class, his dark skin glistening under the fluorescent lights. Marcus Thompson sat rigid in his seat, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the chalkboard. He could feel the weight of the stares, the silent judgment of his peers. But he said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence was his only defense against the world's cruelty. Professor Grayson wasn't finished. He strode down the aisle, his polished shoes clicking against the linoleum floor, until he stood towering over Marcus. "You see, class," he began, his voice laced with mockery, "this is what happens when people are given opportunities they don't deserve. They squander them. They embarrass themselves. And they embarrass those of us who actually belong here." Marcus's chest tightened. He could feel the heat rising in his cheeks, the sting of humiliation burning through him. But he refused to look up. He refused to give Grayson the satisfaction of seeing his pain. The professor leaned in closer, his breath hot against Marcus's ear. "You're a disgrace, Thompson. A waste of space. And mark my words, you'll never amount to anything." The bell rang, shattering the tension. Students began to shuffle out, their whispers filling the air like a swarm of bees. Marcus remained seated, his hands trembling beneath the desk. He could hear Grayson's laughter echoing in his mind, a cruel reminder of his worthlessness. But what no one knew, what Grayson could never have imagined, was that Marcus Thompson was no ordinary student. Beneath the surface of his quiet demeanor lay a mind so brilliant, so extraordinary, that it defied comprehension. Marcus was a genius, a prodigy who had spent years hiding his true potential, afraid of the world's judgment, afraid of the expectations that came with greatness. And as he sat there, the weight of Grayson's words pressing down on him, something inside Marcus began to shift. A spark ignited in the depths of his soul, a fire that would soon consume everything in its path. Because Marcus Thompson was done hiding. The days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. Marcus continued to endure Grayson's relentless torment, each day a new battle in a war he hadn't chosen to fight. But it wasn't just Grayson. The world seemed determined to break him, to grind him down until there was nothing left. It started with the scholarship committee. Marcus had applied for a prestigious grant, one that would cover his tuition and allow him to focus on his studies without the constant worry of how he would pay for his next meal. He had poured his heart into the application, detailing his struggles, his dreams, his unwavering determination to succeed. But when the letter arrived, it was a rejection. Cold, impersonal and final. The committee had deemed him unworthy of their support, their decision based not on his merit, but on the color of his skin and the circumstances of his birth. Marcus felt the sting of betrayal, the bitter taste of injustice. He had worked so hard, sacrificed so much, only to be told that he wasn't good enough, that he would never be good enough. Then came the rejection from his peers. Marcus had always been an outsider, a quiet observer in a world that valued loudness and bravado. But now the whispers grew louder, the stares more pointed. He was the black kid who didn't belong, the charity case, who had somehow slipped through the cracks. Even his closest friend, Sarah, began to pull away. She had been his rock, his confidant, the one person who had always believed in him. But now she seemed distant, her smiles forced, her words hollow. When Marcus finally confronted her, she looked him in the eye and said the words that would haunt him for years to come. "I'm sorry, Marcus, but I can't be associated with you anymore. It's just too hard." The rejection cut deeper than any insult Grayson could hurl. It was a knife to the heart, a reminder that no matter how hard he tried, he would always be alone. The final blow came from the one place Marcus had always thought was safe, home. His mother, a single woman who had worked tirelessly to provide for him, had always been his anchor. She had believed in him when no one else did, had sacrificed everything to give him a chance at a better life. She was the one who had stayed up late with him when he was a child, helping him with his homework even after long shifts at the factory. She was the one who had whispered to him in the dark, "You're destined for greatness, Marcus. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her words had been his lifeline, the one thing that kept him going when the world seemed determined to crush him. But now even she seemed to be slipping away. The stress of their financial struggles had taken its toll, and she had begun to withdraw, her once bright eyes now dull with exhaustion. Marcus could see the weight of the world pressing down on her, could feel the distance growing between them. She no longer asked him about his day, no longer smiled when he walked into the room. Instead, she sat in silence, her hands trembling as she counted the few dollars they had left, her face etched with worry. One night, as they sat at the kitchen table, the silence between them was deafening. The air was thick with unspoken words, with the weight of everything they had lost. Marcus could feel the tension in the room, could see the way his mother's shoulders sagged under the burden of their struggles. He wanted to reach out to her to tell her that everything would be okay, but the words caught in his throat. How could he promise her something he wasn't sure he believed himself? Finally, Marcus broke the silence, his voice trembling with fear and desperation. "Mom, I need you. I can't do this alone." She looked at him, her eyes filled with a sadness that broke his heart. For a moment, she seemed to hesitate as if she wanted to say something, to offer him the comfort he so desperately needed. But then her shoulders slumped and she looked away, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Marcus. But I don't know how to help you anymore. I don't know how to fix this." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut, knocking the air out of his lungs. He felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under him, leaving him free falling into an abyss of despair. His mother had always been his rock, the one person he could count on no matter what. And now, even she was giving up. Marcus wanted to scream, to beg her to fight, to tell her that they could get through this together. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he sat there in stunned silence, his mind racing with thoughts he couldn't fully process. Was this it? Was this how it all ended? With his mother broken and defeated, and him alone in a world that had never wanted him? The days that followed were a blur of numbness and pain. Marcus went through the motions, attending classes, studying, and trying to keep up appearances. But inside, he felt hollow, as if a part of him had died that night at the kitchen table. He couldn't shake the feeling of abandonment, the sense that he had been left to fend for himself in a world that had no place for him. But even in the depths of his despair, Marcus refused to give up. He had been knocked down, beaten, and broken, but he was still standing. And deep inside, he knew that he had the power to rise again, to prove to the world that he was more than the sum of his struggles. He didn't know how or when or even if he could do it. But he knew he had to try. Because Marcus Thompson was a fighter. And he was about to show the world just how strong he could be. The turning point came on a cold, gray morning. Marcus sat in the library, surrounded by towering stacks of books, his mind racing with ideas. The library had become his sanctuary, a place where he could escape the chaos of his life and lose himself in the world of numbers and equations. It was here, amidst the quiet hum of turning pages and the faint scent of old paper, that Marcus found solace. The walls of books seemed to whisper to him, offering secrets and solutions to problems that had plagued humanity for centuries. And it was here, in this sacred space, that Marcus began to feel the first flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. He had spent the night poring over advanced mathematical theories, his fingers flying across the pages as he solved problems that had stumped even the most brilliant minds. The equations danced before his eyes, a symphony of logic and beauty that only he could fully appreciate. But it wasn't just about the math. It was about the fire that had been ignited within him, the burning desire to prove Grayson wrong, to show the world that he was more than just a waste of space. The humiliation, the rejection, the abandonment, it all fueled him now, driving him to push harder, to dig deeper, to find the strength to rise above it all. As he worked, a thought began to form in his mind, a plan so audacious, so daring, that it made his heart race with excitement. He would enter the prestigious National Mathematics Competition, a contest reserved for the brightest minds in the country. It was an event that attracted geniuses from every corner of the nation, a battleground where only the best of the best could hope to compete, let alone win. And Marcus wouldn't just enter, he would win. The idea was insane. The competition was known for its brutal difficulty, and the odds were stacked against him. He had no formal training, no mentor to guide him, no resources to draw from. But Marcus didn't care. He had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. This was his chance to prove himself, to show the world that he was more than the sum of his struggles. It was his chance to silence the voices that had told him he would never amount to anything, to shatter the expectations that had been placed on him by a world that had never believed in him. He threw himself into his studies with a ferocity that surprised even himself. Day and night, he worked, his mind consumed by numbers, equations, and theories. He barely slept, barely ate, his entire existence focused on one goal: victory. The library became his second home, the books his only companions. He devoured every text he could find, from ancient mathematical treatises to cutting-edge research papers. He solved problem after problem, each one more complex than the last, pushing himself to the limits of his abilities. And as he worked, something began to change. The pain, the humiliation, the rejection, it all began to fade, replaced by a sense of purpose, a determination that burned brighter than any flame. Marcus Thompson was no longer the quiet, broken boy who had been crushed by the world. He was a force to be reckoned with, a storm waiting to be unleashed. The fire that had been ignited within him grew with each passing day, fueled by the knowledge that he was capable of greatness, that he had the power to change his destiny. But it wasn't just about proving Grayson wrong, or winning the competition. It was about something deeper, something more profound. It was about reclaiming his identity, about proving to himself that he was more than the labels the world had placed on him. It was about showing that no matter how many times he was knocked down, he would always rise again. And as he worked, Marcus began to see glimpses of the man he was becoming. A man who refused to be defined by his past, a man who was determined to carve out a future for himself, no matter the cost. The days blurred together, each one a whirlwind of study and preparation. Marcus's hands were often stained with ink, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. But he didn't care. He was consumed by a singular focus, a drive that pushed him forward even when his body begged him to stop. And as the competition drew closer, Marcus could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was it. The culmination of all his hard work, all his pain, all his determination. He was ready. Ready to show the world what he was made of. Ready to prove that no matter how many times he was knocked down, he would always rise again. And when the day of the competition finally arrived, Marcus walked into the room with his head held high, his eyes blazing with confidence. The other competitors glanced at him, some with curiosity, others with disdain. But Marcus didn't care. He was here for one reason and one reason only, to win. As he took his seat, he felt a calm settle over him, a sense of clarity that he had never experienced before. This was his moment, and he was ready to seize it. The competition was a blur of intense focus and adrenaline. The room was filled with the sound of scratching pencils, the rustle of paper, and the occasional sigh of frustration. Marcus moved through the problems with a speed and precision that left the judges stunned. His mind was a well-oiled machine, processing information at a level that seemed almost superhuman. Each problem was a puzzle, a challenge to be solved, and Marcus approached them with a calm determination that belied the storm raging inside him. The first round was relatively straightforward, a series of problems designed to test the competitor's basic understanding of mathematical principles. Marcus breezed through them, his confidence growing with each correct answer. But he knew that the real challenge lay ahead. The second round was where the competition truly began, with problems that required not just knowledge, but creativity, intuition, and a deep understanding of the underlying principles. As the second round began, Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline. The problems were more complex, more abstract, and required a level of thinking that went beyond mere calculation. He dove into them with a ferocity that surprised even himself, his mind racing as he pieced together the solutions. He could feel the eyes of the judges on him, their gazes filled with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. But Marcus didn't care. He was in his element, his mind a whirlwind of numbers and equations, each one leading him closer to the answer. The third round was where the competition truly separated the best from the rest. The problems were unlike anything Marcus had ever seen before, a series of multi-layered equations that required not just mathematical skill, but a deep understanding of the underlying principles. He could feel the tension in the room, the other competitors struggling to keep up, their faces etched with frustration and despair. But Marcus remained calm, his mind focused, his hands steady as he worked through each problem. And then, with a final triumphant flourish, he wrote down the answer to the last problem. He had done it. He had solved the unsolvable. The room erupted into applause as the judges announced the winner. Marcus Thompson, the boy who had been told he would never amount to anything, had just won the national mathematics competition. As he stood on the stage, the trophy in his hands, Marcus felt a surge of emotion unlike anything he had ever experienced. It wasn't just pride or joy or relief. It was vindication. He had proven to the world, and to himself, that he was more than the sum of his struggles. That he was a genius, a force to be reckoned with. The weight of the trophy in his hands was a tangible reminder of everything he had overcome, of the battles he had fought and the victories he had won. But even as he basked in the glory of his triumph, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The applause, the accolades, the recognition, it was all well and good, but it wasn't enough. He had proven himself to the world, but he still had to confront the demons that had haunted him for so long. He still had to face Grayson, to confront the man who had tried to break him, to show him that he had failed. And as he looked out at the crowd, his eyes met those of Professor Grayson, who stood in the back of the room, his face pale with shock. Marcus held his gaze for a moment, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. Because he knew that this was just the beginning. He had proven himself to the world, but he still had to prove himself to himself. He still had to find his place in the world, to carve out a future for himself, to show that he was more than just a winner of a competition. The aftermath of the competition was a whirlwind of attention and accolades. Marcus was hailed as a prodigy, a once-in-a-generation talent who had defied the odds to achieve greatness. Reporters clamored for interviews, universities offered scholarships, and even the most prestigious academic institutions reached out, eager to have him join their ranks. But amidst the celebration, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The trophies, the recognition, the applause, it was all well and good, but it didn't fill the void that had been carved into his soul by years of pain and rejection. He had proven himself to the world, but he still had to confront the demons that had haunted him for so long. It wasn't until he returned to school that he realized what it was. As he walked through the halls, the whispers followed him, but this time they were filled with awe and admiration. Students who had once ignored him now looked at him with respect, their eyes wide with wonder. Even Professor Grayson seemed to have softened, his once cutting remarks replaced with a grudging respect. But Marcus knew that the real battle wasn't over. He had proven his worth, but he still had to confront the man who had tried to break him, to show him that he had failed. One day as he sat in the library, he was approached by a young girl, no more than 12 years old. She looked up at him with wide, hopeful eyes, and in her hands she held a crumpled piece of paper. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice trembling with nervousness, "can you help me with this problem? I don't understand it." Marcus looked down at the paper, and his heart ached as he saw the familiar equations, the same ones that had once seemed so insurmountable to him. He knelt down, his eyes meeting hers, and smiled. "Of course," he said gently. "Let me show you." As he explained the problem, Marcus felt a sense of peace wash over him. This was what it was all about. Not the trophies or the accolades or the recognition. It was about helping others, about using his gifts to make a difference in the world. The girl's eyes lit up as she began to understand, her face breaking into a smile that filled Marcus with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. In that moment he realized that his true purpose wasn't just to prove himself, but to lift others up, to show them that they too could achieve greatness, no matter how many times they had been knocked down. And as he walked away, the girl's grateful smile etched in his mind, Marcus realized that he had finally found his purpose. He wasn't just a genius. He was a teacher, a mentor, a beacon of hope for those who had been told they would never succeed. He began to spend more time helping others, tutoring students who struggled with math, and sharing his story with those who needed to hear it. He spoke of the pain, the humiliation, the rejection, but he also spoke of the fire that had been ignited within him, the determination that had driven him to rise above it all. But Marcus knew that his journey wasn't over. He still had to confront Grayson, to face the man who had tried to break him. One day as he stood in the hallway, Grayson approached him, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. "Marcus," he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you. I let my prejudices cloud my judgment, and I treated you unfairly. You've proven me wrong in ways I never thought possible." Marcus looked at him, his eyes steady, his voice calm. "Thank you, Professor," he said. "But this was never about you. This was about me. About proving to myself that I was more than the labels the world placed on me. And now, I'm going to make sure that no one else has to go through what I did." Grayson nodded, his face filled with a mixture of regret and respect. And as Marcus walked away, he felt a sense of closure, a final chapter in the story of his pain and struggle. He had risen from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. The fire that had been ignited within him had grown into a blazing inferno, a force that would light the way for others. Because Marcus Thompson was no longer just a survivor. He was a conqueror.